The year 2022 was loaded with milestones in the comic book industry with the 60th anniversary of Spider-Man, Hulk, Thor, and Ant-Man. It's also the 50th anniversary of Luke Cage, Ghost Rider, Swamp Thing, and Adam Warlock, who will make his first full appearance in Guardians 3 in 2023. It's also the 40th anniversary of Monica Rambeau, who shined in WandaVision, and the 30th anniversary of Harley Quinn, who made her debut in Batman the Animated Series, now played expertly in live action by Margot Robbie. Unfortunately, we had to say goodbye to legends like Neil Adams, who redefined Batman and was a leading figure in creator rights. George Perez, most famous for co-creating the New Teen Titans and Deathstroke, and Kevin Conroy, who was the voice of Batman for decades. All of you will be missed, and you are among the immortals now. See you in the next life. Okay, just two more things before we get started with the list. I want to acknowledge a breakout artist of the year. Last year it was Peach Momoko. This year it's Jay Ferguson. He's an extremely talented Canadian airbrush artist who specializes in photorealism, and you're looking at some of his portfolio right now. His skill and attention to detail are uncanny. This Harley Quinn piece really takes the cake, and it really shows you his process on what type of equipment he's using. That's it. His best cover art in the comic book industry was Department of Truth number 11 from Image Comics, and the showstopper Vampirella vs. Red Sonja number 2 from Dynamite Entertainment. He does more than just sexy women. Here's his take on both Frankenstein and them. I tagged his website here. I'll put it in the description as well. You're going to see a lot more from Jade in 2023. His art is fantastic. Now allow me to do a quick recap on the top comic of each year since I started this channel. It may not seem like it because time goes by fast, but this is my 8th annual top 10 comics of the year list. And what you're seeing now is the top comic of each year from 2015 to 2021. I'll put a link in the description for all those previous top 10 lists if you want to see those. And I hope you do, because all the great stuff you see on television and the movies all starts here in printed comics. I believe that printed comics are like the minor leagues, and they work their way up to the major leagues, which is live action. Okay, thank you for hanging there with me during the introduction. Now without any further ado, I present to you the top 10 comics of 2022. Number 10. Blade Vampire Nation, number 1 from Marvel Comics. First release on November 16th, 2022. It's really awesome sauce seeing Blade headline a title in comics. The storyline involves Dracula founding a new homeland for vampires on Chernobyl. In real life, this is the nuclear facility area in Ukraine which had a meltdown, which makes it uninhabitable for real life today. And Blade is brought in as a detective, but more like a sheriff to police this place, getting his Clint Eastwood on, sort of like the spaghetti westerns. And when a group of human mercenaries infiltrates the place and kills a high-ranking government official, Blade is tasked with finding out who sent them, but it might be an inside job. As you know, the Blade character went from obscurity into the conscious of pop culture with the 1998 release of his Blade movie, played expertly by Wesley Snipes, and it spawned 2 sequels. Blade is being rebooted, and this time it's the MCU, and they've recast it with Mahershala Ali. This is the actor who played Cottonmouth in the Luke Cage Netflix series, and he's won Best Supporting Actor twice for both Moonlight and Green Book. And what you're looking at right now is some concept fan art of what he might look like as Blade in the future. The Blade movie reboot is currently scheduled for a September 2024 release. Until then, follow his adventures in comics as he slays rogue vampires. Number 9. Harley Quinn, the Animated Series, issue number 6 from DC Comics, released in February of 2022. This is the finale of a 6-part miniseries which ties into the animated series on HBO Max. And the actress from The Big Bang Theory who plays Penny voices Harley Quinn. I don't know if you've been watching the show, but it's loud, crude, crass, vulgar, and completely hilarious. And I expect for you anti-woke people to cringe because it's outrageously in-your-face gay. The storyline in the miniseries involves Harley Quinn and Poison Ivy, who have recently gotten married. And they're supposed to be off on their honeymoon, but instead they're being chased and pursued by Commissioner Gordon, who has turned insane. It almost feels like a Thelma and Louise story, except that Thelma and Louise in this case are lesbians. Along the way, they get help from the anti-hero Vixen, who is also a lesbian in this story. And they also get help from Catwoman, who is a bisexual in this storyline. So yes, everyone's gay in this. The animated series had some controversy when it came out that Batman, who's not gay in this by the way, was going to pleasure Catwoman in a certain way, and DC blocked it, saying Batman doesn't do that. But anyway, the miniseries was very fun. I really enjoyed it, and the conclusion was fulfilling. And why they never used Poison Ivy in the live action movie DC universe, I have no idea. And whether if Harley and Ivy became a couple or not, that's for another day, but she should be in the movies. We haven't got a movie version of this character since when? The 1990s with Uma Thurman? But I digress. The miniseries in the comics was fantastic. Number 8. Primos #1 from AWA Studios, released in February of 2022. This is part 1 of a 4-part, very impressive sci-fi action series with Latinx characters as the leads. There isn't nearly enough Latin representation in comics, and this exceeded my expectations. It was written and created by Al Madrigal, who's an actor and comedian you might have saw on The Daily Show in the past. AWA is a small publisher which was co-founded by Axel Alonso, who used to be the editor-in-chief over at Marvel. And he too is of Latin descent, and they talked about how important it was for them to tell the story. It involves two Mayan brothers 2 centuries ago who construct a spacecraft that send them hurtling into space. They return to Earth 2 centuries later and found out that their civilization's been destroyed. One of the brothers vows revenge and seeks to decimate the planet with intergalactic technology they gathered on their travels. To prevent this from happening, his sibling creates a contingency plan that activates the world's protectors, which are the descendants of their own family. Now, the fate of the planet lies in the hands of 3 cousins scattered through Central and North America who have never met. So that plot may have similarities to the MCU version of Namor, now Kukulkan, which uses a Mayan and Aztec revenge plot as well. But that similarity is probably just a coincidence because Al states that he wrote this story a long time ago and finally got to publish it once he met Axel. Primos does an incredible job of execution on its premise in terms of trying to capture this type of sci-fi action, and the artwork, I really fell in love with it. It's really, really good. So go out there and find all 4 issues or just get the trade paperback. Number 7. New Champion of Shazam #1 from DC Comics, first released in August of 2022. And what's going on in this series is that Mary Bromfield of the Shazam family gets her own adventure, and because of reasons, Billy Batson is no longer available, and she has to take the lead as the key Shazam. Like the live action Shazam, it delivers great action, but also has this very smart comedy about it. Because Mary thought that the orphan thing and the Shazam lieutenant thing was in her past, and now she's moving on to college. She's very insecure about being on her own for the first time, and she desperately wants to fit in. She makes some new friends very quickly, and everything seems to be going fine until she attends a student orientation, and inside her pocketbook is a magic talking rabbit that sent a message from Billy telling her that she has to take over as the new champion. Then the rabbit says, "Hey, I've done my job, now can I have carrots?" And Mary's like, "Oh no, this is not happening. I'm just trying to have a normal life. I'm not trying to take on this responsibility." The rabbit's like, "You don't have any choice. The whole world depends on you. Now can I have those carrots?" And did I mention she's the only one that can hear the rabbit, so the rest of the freshman class thinks she's crazy, of course, which is exactly what she didn't want trying to start a new life. So reluctantly, she takes on the mantle of Shazam and does her duty. And by the way, Shazam Part 2, known as Fury of the Gods, makes its debut on March 17, 2023, with Grace Fulton returning to play the Mary Bromfield character. And the New Champion of Shazam is a very fun read. Be sure to pick it up. Number 6 is Rose Gallery #1 from Image Comics, released in July of 2022. It is both a love letter and an indictment to the super hardcore fans of comic book fiction. It's about a group of comic book nerd friends who hang out at a comic book store all day, playing games and chatting, and talking mostly about their favorite comic book property, the Red Rogue. It's a character with a lot of similarities to Black Widow from Marvel and Nightwing over at DC, and it has a very successful live-action TV show that's been on for about 10 years. And these super fans are very unhappy with the direction of the show, and they blame it on the actress who plays her, saying she has too much power on the show's artistic direction, and they're very unhappy about the way she's deviating away from the comic source. And the last straw for these fans is when the actress who plays the Red Rogue gets her hands on a very valuable and limited edition of a Red Rogue comic book. So this ragtag group of nerds decide to do a home invasion on this actress and steal this precious and invaluable comic because they don't think she deserves it. In addition, they're going to dress up like the villains from her actual Rogues Gallery from the comic. But the question is, are they in over their head? Issue #1 is a great setup for a future fight that's going to be bloody. I think this is a very underrated series, and it positions itself as The Purge meets Scream, but with a comic book twist. Number 5 is Batman Beyond, Neo Year #1 from DC Comics. This was the pick of the week for April 6, 2022. You're probably familiar with this Batman franchise. It's told in the future where Bruce Wayne is an old man and he's handing off the baton to Terry McGinnis, who's the new Batman. Well, the wrinkle in this rebooted story is that Bruce Wayne is now dead, and Terry is struggling to do this Batman thing off the grid. He's basically an analog hero in a digital world. So how does he do it without Bruce's help? That's the challenge here. Batman fans like myself really want to see this version of Batman adapted into live action. And bring back Michael Keaton, of course, and he's now age appropriate for the role. Hey, once Batman, always Batman. I don't have my eye on a particular actor I think who should play Terry McGinnis. I think it should be a newcomer and a fresh face, unknown actor. Kind of like Christopher Reeve when he first started playing Superman in 1978. Why this isn't a live action movie trilogy yet shows the incompetence on Warner Brothers' part. And to think think they spent $9 million developing, shooting, and then canceling Batgirl, when Batman Beyond is a much stronger property. They really don't get it. I mean, seriously. But anyway, the Batman Beyond Neo Year miniseries is 6 issues deep. It's well executed and adds more layers to the Batman dystopian future. Issue number 1 in the whole miniseries is a no-brainer pickup. Number 4 is Breakout number 1 from Dark Horse Comics. This was the pick of the week for April 13th, 2022. This is a very underrated sci-fi story about aliens that show up and start abducting young people between the ages of 11 and 20 years old. They don't communicate with the people of the Earth. They give us no clue of their intention and what they're going to do. It's just this giant cube in the sky, and it's sucking up young people randomly. The biggest powers in the world, like the United States and China, are powerless to stop it. Our biggest weapons do nothing to it. And eventually life just goes on with this impending doom in the sky. But one day a teenager whose younger brother is an abductee recruits some other teens to try to find a way to fight back. And they're like, hey, if the government and the adults have given up, then we won't. We will fight. And they all put their skills together in a plan which will involve them getting abducted intentionally, because they have intelligence on what the inside of the ship looks like from the abductees whose cell phones were still working until they went dead. This excellent miniseries reminds me of Goonies meets Independence Day. It's like Goonies, and it revolves around some young people trying to find a buried treasure. In this case, the buried treasure is their loved ones who they're trying to rescue. And it's like Independence Day, where the humans of Earth, who are overmatched by some aliens with superior technology, use every ounce of grit and wit that they have to succeed in the end against all odds. The 4th and final installment drops on December 21st, 2022. And if you missed this, you can pick up the graphic novel, which will be released in April 2023. I view this miniseries as a must-have for your PC. And yo, Hollywood, you need to be making this into a film. Gen Z needs more heroes. Number 3 is Knighted number 1 from AWA Studios. This came out so late in 2021 that I'm counting it for 2022 because nobody was paying attention. I know I wasn't, but I missed a good one, so I went back and got this. Knighted is both a spoof and a love letter to the Batman franchise. I mean, just look at the cover. It's a swipe from The Dark Knight Returns by Frank Miller, one of the most famous miniseries about Batman ever. This is part 1 of a 5-part miniseries about a meek paper pusher who by accident kills the city's protector and vigilante named the Knight. And when he finds out that the city's going to turn into chaos and overwritten by crime, he decides to don the suit himself. And of course, clumsy hilarity ensues. Fortunately, he has the Knight's former butler and assistant, so basically he has an Alfred to show him the ropes. Knighted was written by Greg Hurwitz, who wrote Legends of the Dark Knight over at DC and Vengeance of Moon Knight over at Marvel. So he's the perfect guy for writing a Batman story. So yeah, this love letter to the Dark Knight is really working. And artwork of Mark Teixeira is a real standout. He got famous drawing Moon Knight in the 90s anyway. AWA is putting out some incredible stuff. If you're not paying attention, you should be. One of its co-founders is Axel Alonso, who used to be the editor-in-chief over at Marvel. And well, you know, his new imprint, AWA, has 2 of my top 10 comics of the year in 2022, with Primos, I mentioned before, also making the list. This publisher is putting out some very high-quality stuff that you should be trying out. The conclusion of Knighted was issue number 5, which I named the pick of the week for April 20th, 2022. If you're a fan of Batman or just comics in general, then you're going to love this. If you can't find all 5 issues out there, then there should be a trade paperback coming out pretty soon. Number 2 is Hulk vs. Thor, Banner of War Alpha number 1 from Marvel Comics. This was the pick of the week for May the 11th, 2022. And this is just part 1 of an ongoing crossover between these 2 major characters in the Marvel Universe. And because comics, they wound up fighting each other. Their rivalry goes back to 1962. That's when these characters were first introduced. Hulk in May of 1962 with the Incredible Hulk number 1. He was gray when he was first introduced, but they wound up settling on green because they couldn't get a consistent gray color in the coloring process back then. True story. The creation of Hulk is credited to Stan Lee and Jack Kirby. It's a twist on the story of Frankenstein, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, and the anxiety of the Cold War and the proliferation of weapons that could kill us all. Lou Ferrigno has the distinction of being the only man to ever play the Hulk in live action, in a successful television series that ran from the late 70s to the early 80s. Every Hulk since then and in the future will always be CGI. Thor, the God of Thunder, was first introduced in Journey into Mystery number 83 from August 1962. His creation is credited to Stan Lee, Jack Kirby, and Larry Lieber, who is Stan's brother. The Thor comic is literally based off the God of Thunder from Norse mythology, Thor. These stories were passed down as part of the religion of the ancient Vikings of Norway, and now they're part of our pop culture for our entertainment. So happy 60th anniversary to both Thor and the Hulk. This is a great way to showcase them in a showdown. It is written by Donny Cates. This is the guy that first got famous with God Country number 1, which I named the best comic of 2017, and then Marvel unleashed him with some supernatural horror stories when he took over Thanos, which gave us the Cosmic Ghost Rider, Venom, and of course redefining Thor as well. This is a no-brainer that should be in your collection for any comic fan. It doesn't matter why Thor and Hulk are fighting, as long as they're fighting, it's always fun. Okay, before we get to number 1, as always, I have an honorable mention list. AXE Judgment Day #1 for Marvel Comics. That stands for Avengers, X-Men, Eternals. They're all in this 3-way fight. And the real launch to Marvel's multi-issue summer crossover. A Calculated Man #1 from Aftershock Comics is the story of an accountant for the mob who they plan to take out because he knows too much when the feds come. But he turns the tables on them and starts hunting them and taking them out one by one. It's sort of like Goodfellas meets A Beautiful Mind. Scorched #1 from Image Comics. This is a team up of all the heroes and anti-heroes in the Spawn universe. Modern day Spawn, She-Spawn, Gunslinger Spawn, Medieval Spawn, they all team up for some very cool action horror adventures. Unprepped #1 from Antarctic Studios. This is a comic disaster story about how things fall apart very quickly when a solar flare permanently takes down the grid and we're too reliant on technology to survive. If you're a fan of movies like This Is the End and Don't Look Up, then you'll love this. Ghost Rider from Marvel Comics, being rebooted back to #1 for its 50th anniversary in 2022. A back-to-basic tale stories involving Johnny Blaze. One of the best-looking and consistent comics of the year. Happy 50th anniversary to Johnny Blaze. Black Adam from DC Comics. This has been rebooted to #1 for a 12-issue maxi series. It revolves around the story where Black Adam is dying and he has to choose his successor, which turns out to be a wisecracking young African-American doctor. Slumber #1 from Image Comics, and I really enjoyed this. It's a story of a woman who specializes in entering people's dreams and killing the monsters so they can sleep at night. Think of it as Nightmare on Elm Street meets Inception. Traveling to Mars #1 from Ablaze Comics. It's a story of a man with terminal cancer who agrees to travel to Mars so it can be claimed by a private company who's going to pay his family $10 million once he gets there. It's not your typical superhero action comic book, but it makes you think, what's on your bucket list and what do you want to accomplish in your short time here on the earth? Because you're not promised another day. Once Upon a Time at the End of the World #1 by Boom Studios. This is created and written by Jason Aaron, who I think is the best writer in comics today. Is a story of two friends surviving in a post-apocalyptic world permanently damaged by environmental disaster. And Amazing Fantasy #1000. This is in celebration of the 60th anniversary of Spider-Man. Peter Parker made his first appearance in the pages of Amazing Fantasy issue #15 back in 1962. He's probably right there neck and neck with Batman as the most popular superhero of all time. His legacy is the mantra of, with great power comes great responsibility. Thank you for hanging there with me. I know it's been a long video, so let's get to the #1 comic of 2022. Duel #1 from Bliss on Tap. You probably never heard of this series in this small tiny publisher, but this is phenomenal. It's the story of an FBI agent who's investigating a website called Duel.global, where real life people can actually challenge each other to an actual duel in real life. And it's treated like sports gambling where wagers are put up on who they think will win. And they have rankings in this duel competition, and the #1 ranked guy is a guy named Aaron Burr. Yeah, that's the guy who actually shot Alexander Hamilton, which is captured in the stage play Hamilton. But this Aaron Burr is just a handle name, and he uses it with 3 capital R's because he used to be a teacher. He says that stands for reading, writing, and arithmetic. He's introduced in the beginning of a comic meeting a competitor in a grocery store, and they have a duel right there, and he murders the guy and cashes out. And what the FBI discovers is that a 16-year-old kid in high school is challenging Aaron Burr to a duel. And I won't spoil the ending, but man, it's good. This feels like it's inspired by the movie franchise The Purge, where America's obsession with violence turns into a sport. And it sounds like far-fetched dystopian, but I hope it doesn't actually become true. The co-creator and writer of Duel is Curtis Martins, who reached out to me personally and thanked me for highlighting his comic on my channel. I have some thoughts about how this story could be adapted into other media as well. Hey Netflix, you lost over 1 million subscribers in 2022. You need better material. This is the type of thing you should be adapting. This would be a fantastic ongoing web series, and the FBI agent could be the central character that's investigating what's going on with this Duel underground cult. You could get Australian actor Simon Baker to play the FBI agent. He's most famous for the TV show The Mentalist, and man, he's good. You could get Ethan Hawke to play Aaron Burr. He's most famous for his ride-along with Denzel Washington in Training Day, and is the lead in the movie The Purge, which I mentioned earlier. And Alex Henderson from Tyler Perry's show Assisted Living could play the teenage kid. You can thank me later or just make me the show writer. I'm available. In all seriousness, Duel is one of those things where you have a great concept and perfect execution of said concept. And to me, Duel #1 was the best comic by far in 2022. Alright, what you're seeing right now is a recap of what I consider to be the top comics of 2022. If you include my honorable mentions, it's the top 20 of what I thought was the best for this year. Be sure to speak up in the comment section and let me know what you think of my list. or you can post your own top 10 there. I always like to hear feedback from the people who watch my videos. And if you haven't already done so, be sure to subscribe and click on the bell for notifications. They'll let you know when new videos come out. As I mentioned earlier, it's the 60th anniversary of Hulk, Thor, Ant-Man, and of course, Spider-Man. I made a previous video in honor of Peter Parker's 60th, which breaks down his origin, history, villains, love interests, key issues, plus his history in animation, television, and the movies. This is Comic Killer signing out for Comic Power. Out.